Hello and welcome to the second webinar as part of the NDIS Success Roadmap. Our subject for today is understanding the market. First of all, Community Business Bureau acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout Australia. We recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and community. We pay our respects to them and their cultures and to elders past, present and emerging. At the moment, I'm sitting in Adelaide recording this, and so I'm on the lands of the Kaurna people here, so I pay my respects to them. Many Australians are now benefiting from the NDIS, or the National Disability Insurance Scheme. This includes, as at the most recent data that I've seen, about 370,000 people who are receiving disability supports right now. At the full rollout, the NDIS will provide $22 billion in funding per year to an estimated 460,000 people with disability. And this is going to contribute to the creation of around 90,000 jobs in the disability sector across Australia. Additionally, there are many people at the moment who are not using the full allocation of their NDIS budgets, and there's a need and opportunity for service providers to meet this gap, growing their services at the same time. With the significant opportunity created by growth in the scheme and low levels of NDIS plan utilisation, it has never been more important to understand the NDIS market, and that's our topic for today. Thank you for signing up to CBB's NDIS Success Program and tuning in now for the second webinar. Whether you are new to the NDIS and thinking of starting NDIS services, or you're already an existing provider looking to grow or expand your services, this NDIS Success Program aims to support sole traders and other organisations to plan for successful. We want to offer you tools and strategies for starting NDIS services or growing your current NDIS service offerings. My name is Andrew Ellis, and on behalf of the business consulting team, I'd like to welcome you to the second NDIS Success webinar, Understanding the Market. Today's webinar is the second in a series of 6 webinars that will provide a roadmap for NDIS success and help you to build an NDIS business plan. In the first webinar, we provided insights into the fundamentals for success within the NDIS market and how the market is structured. In our second webinar today, we're going to help you understand the importance of understanding the market that you want to operate in. We'll talk about the people, who the people are that you support, what it is they need and what it is they want from their NDIS provider, and who else is already providing NDIS services in your area. In the third webinar, we addressed the design of NDIS service and the importance of ensuring the service delivery model you implement matches to the NDIS structures. The NDIS is highly regulated and providers need to understand the code of practice and the quality and safeguards rules and regulations. These will be the topic of webinar 4 as we look at compliance requirements. Our fifth webinar will look at how you can position your product or service in the NDIS market, including its promotion. Then lastly, in webinar 6, we'll explain the importance of understanding and analysing your potential revenue and associated costs. Financial viability and sustainability is critical in operating under the NDIS. Each of our webinars will be followed by a Q&A session to give you the opportunity to ask questions. We encourage you to submit questions at any time prior to the Q&A session via the Facebook group or email. Please join our NDIS Success Facebook group if you haven't had a chance yet. The group offers a forum to network, share ideas or problems, and offer answers outside of the Q&A sessions. We've compiled a template which will help you to develop a business plan. We also provide activity worksheets for each webinar to guide you through exercises and questions that you need to ask. Additional information and links will be available on our website. To maximise your understanding, we strongly recommend you watch all the webinars and work through the activity worksheets during or after each session. Our first webinar on success in the NDIS provided an introduction, including a brief history of what has led us to where we are now. It looked at who gets access to the NDIS services, what goes into an NDIS plan, how it is funded, and how the money is managed. The first webinar is available via the NDIS Success Program resources on the CBB website. As we go through today's webinar, I encourage you to have the online activity worksheet close to hand so that you can think about the exercises at the same time. So today's webinar. Before you invest in setting up or growing your service, it's important to ensure there is a market demand or a need for the service that you're offering. You may have a strong idea already about the type of service that you want to deliver, or have some information from potential customers about what they need. There are 5 key topics for us today in this webinar. First, we're going to consider the competencies or strengths of you and your organisation at the moment. This is what you do. Second, we'll discuss who the current customers are, since this will inform the profile of potential new customers you would want to attract and work with. Understanding the current customers informs the potential new types of customers and markets that may be attractive. Fourthly, it's important to understand the nature and level of competitors before launching into new target customers and markets. And lastly, we'll use the above analysis to identify where there are gaps in existing services and market opportunities to move into. This webinar is structured to help you complete the activity worksheet, which will provide you with a better understanding of how the NDIS market applies to you and where there are opportunities to pursue growth. You might find it easier to stop and start the webinar as you watch it and fill in the relevant sections of the worksheet as you go. First up, we're going to look at the competencies for you and your organisation at the moment. Before we look at the potential market that's available under the NDIS, it's important first to consider the current strengths and capabilities of your organisation. In other words, you need to understand yourself, your organisation, to set a context through which to better understand your market. Your target market will be different to that of other organisations. We use language throughout this webinar of the organisation, in inverted commas, but where your organisation is a sole trader, this effectively relates to you, the business owner. Depending on the context, it might also be useful to think about any key business partners or suppliers that you have too. Every organisation has competencies that they use to deliver services to customers. These can be skills, assets, technology, systems or processes, or other elements of the organisation which it uses to deliver the services. In essence, this is what you do. We recommend taking a strengths-based approach to your work, looking at how you leverage what you do best to develop new services or scale your current service offering into new markets. In looking at your organisational capabilities, consider a broad range of factors such as skills and experience, stakeholder relationships, and market positioning. Following along in the activity worksheet, have a think about the strengths of your organisation. Some prompts to help you have a think about this are: what are you good at? What's working well? You'd also have a think about why people with disability come to you and what types of skills, processes, or technology you have. Next, have a think about the weaknesses of your organisation. Some prompts to help you think about that is: what's not working well? Might be useful to think in terms of why people with disability leave you and go to another organisation or competitor to use their services instead. Where do you have room for improvement? And what types of skills, processes, technology are not working as they should? When reviewing your draft list of strengths or competencies, it's possible to categorise them as critical or as support competencies. Critical competencies are visible to clients. Support competencies are behind the scenes, for example, finance or HR. It would be worth considering whether you have addressed both these types of competencies on your list. Differentiators are important to understand since they reflect why clients come to you instead of your competitors. They also form the basis of your marketing, which we'll discuss in a later webinar. When looking at your weaknesses, it's important to understand the impact of them relative to others and identify what needs most urgent attention. For many newer NDIS providers, these weaknesses might relate to quality systems or technology, since many organisations are still adapting to those changes in the NDIS market. Customers. Moving on to topic 2, we're going to talk about who your current customers are, since this will inform the profile of potential new customers that you would want to attract and work with. The people you support at the moment are your current customers and effectively your current market. Take a few minutes to describe them and to define them. There's a section in the activity worksheet to help you do that, just this. I'd suggest you could pause the webinar at this point and consider the questions or the points that are on the screen here to be able to try to articulate and describe who your different customers are. So what's the nature of their disability or their support needs as a result of their disability? Do they fit a consistent age range. Where are they located? What services do they need? What services are they buying from you? And what services do they go to another provider for? If you have information about their NDIS plan, then this can be valuable in informing what other services they need. And last, but certainly not least important, consider the unique requirements of any particular community segments that you're supporting. This might mean Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islanders or members of culturally and linguistically diverse groups. What data do you have on your existing customers? There might be a summary in a business plan or strategic plan, or your client database can be a rich source of information on where your clients are, how often you contact them, what services you're providing, and so on. What do your existing customers say about you? If you have data from customer surveys or customer satisfaction data, then this can be useful here too. Look beyond a score and for the comments, which can be so rich in value. Under the NDIS, your existing customers have a choice and control over where they go for their services. With this power in their hands, it's more important than ever before to provide an excellent service that they want to come back for. The more you know about existing customers, the more it will help you as you start to identify new customers. Now that we have a clearer picture of the current customers, next we're going to have a look at potential new types of customers and markets that may be attractive. Utilization describes the amount of an NDIS plan that is being used to purchase services. Average utilisation rates of NDIS plans across most of the country are struggling to get above 70%. So 30% of the funds in the plan are not being used. This means that the easiest growth opportunity that's available to many providers is just to provide more services to existing customers. These utilisation rates are even lower in regional areas and in Aboriginal or remote communities, which is why supporting NDIS service providers in regional and remote areas is a focal point of this webinar series. The NDIS produce quarterly reports which provide details on many aspects of the NDIS market. It's important to take time to familiarise yourself with this data and to review it regularly. Data from these quarterly reports shows that between 36 and 61% of NDIS plans are presently being utilised or spent in regional and remote areas where local populations are less than 5,000 people. That means there's opportunities for service providers to increase services to those individuals and provide more services to existing clients, new services in these existing locations, or services to new locations that are not currently well served. Data from the NDIS can be used to identify the numbers of potential clients in different locations. In this section, we're going to go through some high-level data that's available from the NDIS. We understand that some of the people viewing this webinar will have seen this data before, but there are many people who have signed up who are new to the NDIS, so this will be new to you. Note that you should be able to look more deeply to available data which will be more relevant to your location and your services. In other words, it's more useful to look at segmenting the market into the area of most interest based on needs, location, and who you can help short, medium, and long term. As we go through this data, have a think about where your potential new clients are located, what services they need, and the potential financial value of those services. So since the scheme's introduction, the NDIS has been updating and issuing data on a quarterly basis regarding participants and providers. With the latest data at March 2020, there are about 370,000 active participants now in the NDIS. Of these, 6.1% or 6.2% are Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islanders, and about 9% come from cultural and linguistically diverse backgrounds. There's around 14,000 NDIS registered providers, of whom nearly 10,000 were active in the last quarter. And you can see from the numbers on screen that a significant number are sole traders. Whilst there's a significant percentage of payments that go to the top 25% of providers, there remain opportunities for providers given that only 69% of average plan values are being utilised or spent. The focal area of this NDIS success program of webinars to look at increasing services and supporting the growth of providers in regional and remote areas. The data we're showing here is an example of that available about the NDIS, showing the spread of services across major cities through to smaller towns, remote and very remote locations. Data like this is updated quarterly and available by state to assist providers with understanding the size of potential markets. It's also possible to see from this data how many NDIS participants there are in the major cities through to remote locations. The NDIS also provides information regarding the disability group and numbers in each category, which are shown here. Again, this data is available down to a state level as well. From this data, it's possible to see how many NDIS participants there are with, for example, autism or hearing impairment or multiple sclerosis or other forms of disability. The graph included here shows the average value of NDIS plans by disability group. Again, this data is available down to a state level also. For example, people living with cerebral palsy or acquired brain injury have an average NDIS plan of about $120,000. People living with autism or visual impairment have an average NDIS plan of about $35,000. Through reports like this, it's possible for providers to build up a picture in dollar terms of the market size that is relevant to your target type of market, of type of disability, locations, and the number of people potentially available in the market. If your target market is people with visual impairment, for instance, then you can see the average value of an NDIS plan here and the number of people with that form of disability on the prior page. The graph included here shows the committed supports for active NDIS participants by support category. This data is available down to a state level as well. For example, the largest component is core daily activities, and that represents about 47% of total annualised committed supports. Capacity building daily activities comprise about 15%, support coordination is around 3%, and transport is around 2%. And there are other examples that are shown on screen. The NDIS also provide data on the gender of participants, which you can see as majority male, 62% male, 37% female, and 1% other. We spoke about the different types of plan management in webinar 1. The form of financial management impacts on internal processes that NDIS providers need to have for where invoices are sent and how they're processed, including following up of debtors. We'll talk more about this in later webinars on procedures and financial sustainability. But in this regard, from the latest data, self-managed participants reflect about 31% of participants within the market, and that's been relatively stable from last quarter to this quarter. Plan managed participants represent 38% of the total, and that's been growing from 33% several quarters ago. And you can see that 43% of new participants in the third quarter of 2019-20 took on plan management. So there's significant growth within that sector. And you can see there the agency managed numbers, that's where that growth in plan managed is coming from, with the number of agency managed participants going down from 35% to 32% in the quarter. Support coordination is such an important service under the NDIS, and it supports the participant to understand and implement the funded supports within their NDIS plan, providing linkages to service providers and other government services. The support coordinator helps to negotiate with providers and ensure service agreements and service bookings are completed. The proportion of participants who have support coordination in their plan has been slowly growing in recent quarters and presently sits, you can see there, at 39%. Given this role played by support coordinators, they can be an important source of referral to your organisation, and it's important to build relationships with them. We're continuing to see a significant number of plans that are not fully utilised, meaning that participants have funding available, but for one reason or another, they've not spent the full amount. Whereas only 69% of plans approved nationally are being utilised, we can see here that over a third, or 38%, are less than 50% utilised, creating opportunities for providers to increase services to these participants and to support their needs. One other area where plans are not fully utilised is in smaller population centres. The data shows that towns and cities greater than 5,000 people have about a 67% or better utilisation rate. However, remote areas and towns less than 5,000 people have much lower average utilisation rates. Over the last quarter, the average utilisation in very remote areas has moved up from 36 to 39%, but remains extraordinarily not low. And there's a lot of need for people in those areas to have access to better services. This means there's a high proportion of clients with available funding in these smaller towns and remote areas with unmet needs, and that's a growth opportunity for providers to move into. Data from the NDIS identifies regions where the average utilisation rates are significantly lower than the national average. Lower utilisation rates in these regions indicate opportunities for providers to grow services with potentially less competition. Regions of greatest need where their utilisation is more than 10% lower than the national average include Darwin Remote, East Arnhem, and Katherine, which are all in the Northern Territory. Regions where the utilisation rate is 5 to 10% lower than the national average include North Sydney, Sydney, Southeastern Sydney, Western Sydney, Southwestern Sydney, all in New South Wales, Springbank, Melton in Victoria, as well as inner East Melbourne and Southern Melbourne. In South Australia, the far north, Tasmania, southeast, a few other areas in the Northern Territory with Central Australia and Darwin Urban, and then the Goldfields, Esperance and North Metro regions of Western Australia. We'll now consider a worked example of the market for people with psychosocial disability. From the graphs or tables on previous slides, we can see that people with psychosocial disability across Australia have an average plan value of $65,000, and there's 27,848 people with this condition. Thus, the value of plans with people for people with psychosocial disability is about $1.8 billion. If your organisation works with people with this form of disability just within the Northern Territory, then we can look at more detailed NDIS reports for the state and see that there are 281 people with this condition, but they have an average NDIS plan of $150,000, which creates a market of $42 million for our services. Other useful statistics across the Northern Territory, but noting these are for all forms of disability, show that 74% of plans have support coordination in that territory. 58% of plans are less than 50% utilised, and utilisation in very remote areas is just 33%. Applying these numbers to our example of people with psychosocial disability shows that a key referral source to identify new customers will be to talk with support coordinators, since most plans have support coordination. If there are people in very remote areas with an average psychosocial plan of $150,000 with just 33% utilisation, then there's a lot of unmet need for their condition, but also about $100,000 available in additional services to each person in that situation based on their NDIS plan. In this analysis, we've extrapolated some numbers which would need to be tested before launching new service delivery, but it does show the potential value of markets which still remain available for service providers to move into. You might already have ideas about new services that you would consider providing or new markets that you might want to enter. It's worthwhile taking time to ensure you really understand the potential market. Look at the NDIS reports to gather information. There are other data sources which could be useful, including the Australian Census data, boosting the local care workforce program, and disability peak bodies. If you refer to the activity worksheet, you'll find some links there to data sources. You can also test your ideas about potential new services by asking existing customers or potential customers. Once you have an idea for a new service or how to grow an existing service, it's good to seek feedback and validation before spending too much time and money building something new. Think about how you can test your ideas. Inexpensive tools like SurveyMonkey and MailChimp can help you to craft a short survey to existing clients and get some feedback before spending money on a new service or market. It's also worthwhile to speak with clients directly, which could be done one-to-one or in small groups, particularly with groups where an online survey is not appropriate. Our fourth topic today is to look at the nature and level of competitors in the marketplace. Understanding the market includes getting an idea of what other NDIS providers are working in your locations that are providing similar services. Data from the NDIS quarterly reports can be used to compare the number of providers versus the size of client group, as this will provide an indicator of where the market gaps are and what areas are well served. A competitor analysis can be completed fairly quickly by looking for the top 3 or 4 different organisations that are similar to yours. There's a template in the activity worksheet to help you do just this. To keep the analysis simple, the competitors might be put into groups such as the big national providers or other local providers. Oftentimes there'll be similar attributes and commonalities. Undertaking the analysis involves looking at the services they provide to people similar to your customers. What do they do better than you? Do they have better systems, marketing, or key people? What makes them unique? In completing the competitor analysis, note that information about some services can be harder to find than others. For example, accommodation providers often don't list where their accommodation is for reasons of client confidentiality. Once you've built up an understanding of what your competitors are doing, you need to think about what to do with that information. It's not about copying them, but you want to know what you do differently and how you compare. Think about what you would say in response to a question from a person with disability considering coming to you. And if they asked you, why would I come to you instead of ABC down the road? Here we've included a competitor analysis market example of a provider that's providing services to people with visual impairment from 4 offices within the Northern Territory. A template for this competitor analysis is included in the activity worksheet. They might have 2 main competitors, being a big corporate that works across all states and major cities, and a sole trader that works in the town of Katherine. The big corporate has strong financials and good marketing, but the sole trader has limited capacity to expand and grow. Whereas our company in the example has offices and provides services across 4 locations, the big corporate is only in Darwin and the sole trader just operates in Katherine. This analysis helps us to identify where there are opportunities to grow with less competition. So now we're into the final topic for today, and we use the analysis completed throughout the webinar to identify where there are gaps in existing services and market opportunities to move into. Opportunities for you to grow or start your business can be identified based on understanding the need and demand in your area and the unmet demand in other areas. Where are your opportunities? Or put another way, where do you see yourself in the future? Thinking about where you see opportunities to pursue growth in your services or locations, are there gaps where no or few competitors are presently working? Using the different sources of information throughout this webinar and in the activity worksheet, where are there opportunities to grow? You might have a list of 10 different ideas. How can you identify which 3 or 4 you can take action on in the near term? One way to think about options for how to grow is to look at a model called Ansoff's matrix. You'll have described the existing products or services and existing markets already by describing your current clients and the strengths. That's the bottom corner of this graph. Thinking about that, are there now, firstly, opportunities for market penetration by providing your existing services to new customers or providing more of the same service to existing customers? Secondly, are there new locations or grouping of clients, for example, type of disability, where you could offer services that you're providing now? That's called market development. Thirdly, are there new services or new types of product that you could offer to existing customers? That's called product development. These tend to be the lower risk and easier ways to grow organically. You could also grow by diversification, which is to provide a new product or service in a new market. This type of growth can have additional risks compared with the other options because you are, in essence, working in an area completely new to the organisation. Helps perhaps to think about an example. Let's say you're an occupational therapy services provider in Port Augusta to children with intellectual disability. You're considering options to grow. You could grow by providing occupational therapy services to people with other forms of disability in Port Augusta, which is product development. Or maybe you'll hire an office down the road in Whyalla to provide OT services to children with intellectual disability there. That's market development. It might be that you can achieve growth in your services revenue and ultimately have a positive impact for more clients through either of these options. Each of them would require that you undertake different activities though. Given the risks, this probably only makes sense for established providers. Providing occupational therapy services to people with other forms of disability in Port Augusta would require understanding the needs of that cohort of people, perhaps requiring some professional development and ensuring you can promote your services to that cohort by changes in your marketing strategy. Providing occupational therapy services to children with intellectual disability down the road in Whyalla would involve opening a new office location, and perhaps one of your existing staff could spend a day or a couple of days a week there to service those clients and split the role between the new location and your existing location while you build scale. As an extension activity, there's value in talking to stakeholders about the ways that you want to grow. Stakeholders include customers, potential customers, and carers or family members. There's space in the activity worksheet to answer questions that will help understand this better. For example, what does that stakeholder think the future state of your company looks like? Or what do they expect you to do? What's important to them? And are the crucial values that form the foundation? And what are the crucial values that form the foundation for your services? We're now starting to get towards the end of today's webinar. We've covered 5 different topics today. Firstly, we considered the competencies of you and your organisation at the moment. Second, we discussed who the current customers are, since this informs the profile of potential new customers that you would want to attract and work with. Understanding the current customers flows on to looking at potential new types of customers and markets, which was our third topic. Fourthly, it's important to understand the nature and level of competitors before launching into new target customers and markets. And lastly, we use the above analysis to identify where there are gaps in existing services and market opportunities to move into. This webinar was structured to help you complete Webinar 2 worksheet and Section 3B of the business plan template, which provides exercises in how the NDIS market applies to you and where there are opportunities to pursue growth. Things to do next. So what should you do after watching this webinar? Please review the questions in this week's activity worksheet and the business plan template. To find the resources and more, please also visit the NDIS Success tab on our website. And please join the Facebook group and post a question or like a question so we know which questions to address first. And our question and answer session is going to be available on the 25th of August. We trust that you found value in today's webinar. The next webinar in our series is on service design. And in this webinar, we'll have 2 main topics to consider. Firstly, what service you'll provide, and then second, designing that service. Design of the service includes areas such as resources, systems and processes, technology, capital expenditure, and setup versus ongoing costs. Well, thank you for watching our second webinar on understanding the market. I really hope that you enjoy and get a lot out of this NDIS Success program, and we look forward to seeing you or hearing from you in the Q&A sessions. And that's all for now. Goodbye.